Hello, welcome to Life Matters. I'm your host, Brendan O'Connell. Well, we have a very special guest today. She's zooming in all the way from Virginia, and her name is Carol Tobias. She's the president of the National Right to Life Committee. Well, welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm happy to be on with you.
Carol, we've had some postmortems after the recent election on November 7th of various states and legislatures and that sort of thing. I'd like to talk about that. I guess the big one would be the Ohio situation. Could you tell us about that?
Well, unfortunately, Ohio voters decided to amend their constitution to allow for unlimited abortion. Now, we were outspent, and the lies from the other side were pretty heavy and magnified by the local press.
And may I ask, what kind of lies did they tell? I know I see a figure that the pro-aborts had spent $40 million, and our side spent $27 million. What kind of lies were they telling?
What kind of what?
Lies were they
lies.
espousing, okay, or misrepresentations?
Well, pro-lifers were trying to tell parents that if this passes, your minor daughter, whether she's 13, 14, 15, can get an abortion, and you won't have the right to even be told that it's happening. And of course, there is a concern because we do hear stories about young girls being forced into abortions by someone who is taking advantage of them, an older man. But if that's happening, the parents don't have the right to know. And of course, the other side would come back and say, that's a lie. This isn't going to affect the parental involvement laws. And that was, getting amplified in the media. Pro-lifers were trying to say this is going to allow second and third trimester abortions. And the other side, coming back, of course, with their millions of dollars, were saying that's a lie. The language says that abortions would be allowed through viability. But the law had an exception for health, which would override viability. And as all pro-lifers know, the Supreme Court in 1973, Doe v. Bolton, defined health to include anything, including what could be the size of the woman's family, her financial situation, her mental and emotional health. So the law, in effect, as we had under Roe v. Wade and Doe v. Bolton, would allow abortion for any reason throughout pregnancy. But again, voters were told that was a lie, and the press, was pretty happy to repeat that. They were told that their ban on partial birth abortions would be overturned. Again, everyone was told that's a lie. But they had the millions of dollars to put that information out there, and it was just very hard for pro-lifers to actually counter that and try to get a foothold into what the magnitude of, the effect of this law will be in the state.
Now, I've heard people complain that, we had a referendum in August, or a vote in Ohio in August, that said that we want to put the threshold, instead of 50% plus one vote, we want to move it up to 60% to change the Ohio Constitution. Do you feel that having a vote in August and then one in November were too close, or somehow was detrimental to the pro-life side?
I've heard that, but I don't know if it was. It gave the proponents of this constitutional measure an effort to say, look, they don't want you to vote, that they're trying to keep you from voting. So that maybe did have some impact. But quite frankly, I think it's a good idea to make it tougher to amend the constitutions. Our founding fathers said that for the federal constitution, you have to have 2/3 of the U.S. House, 2/3 of the U.S. Senate, and 3/4 of the states all in agreement. That they said the Constitution is something that is supposed to be much more permanent, and that it shouldn't kind of ebb and flow with current conditions in the country. That it has to be something that an overwhelming majority of people agree, this is important enough that we need to change this very special document. What we are seeing in so many states is that it only takes 50% plus one to change the Constitution. So who knows, in a few years, some of these states that have had these ballot measures may feel like they've got an upper hand and maybe things have changed and they're going to come back and just change their Constitution. So it basically becomes meaningless. It's kind of like a piece of legislation passed by the legislature. It can be changed at any time if you've got the votes.
Now, Michigan, last year, the prior year, there was a vote on their, I think, was it their Constitution? And our side lost. We only got 43% of the vote. And in Ohio, we only got 43% of the vote. Those were both no votes. And I know that I've attended the 115 forum, and people from Ohio and elsewhere were trying to be very organized and unified with the Ohio situation, which was a year after the Michigan situation. And it didn't really make a difference. Were there other factors that factored into whether how much we lost by? We lost by basically the same percentage in Michigan and in Ohio.
I don't know if that is anything other than a coincidence. What we have seen, though, in all of the states that have had ballot measures, they do a fantastic job of riling up and getting college students to vote. And, you can do polling beforehand showing, looks like it could be close, but the pollsters are not talking to the college students, or the college students are not answering the surveys. I'm not sure what the difference is there, but college students come out in huge numbers because they want abortion, I guess. And that's where we need to figure out how to reach some of those younger people.
I see.
And get more into that and convince them and talk to them about why, killing unborn children is not healthy for our society, and it doesn't protect them if they're going through a difficult situation.
There was also a proposition for marijuana on the ballot at the same time. Do you think that helped the other side, the college students, saying, well, we want to vote on that also? Do you think that helped or hurt the pro-life side?
Oh, I would tend to think that a vote on marijuana brought the college students out as well. So if they were motivated, that they had two issues that were important to them, they got to the polls.
And was the turnout much larger for this particular vote on November 7th, 2023, do you know, compared to a similar, maybe 4 years ago type of thing?
They had a bigger turnout than, like what you might consider off-year elections 2 years ago in 2021. It was not as big as they had last year when they had a governor and a Senate race on the ballot. So it was larger than an off-year election. It wasn't as big as the more traditional election year turnout.
Now, I know Michael New, he wrote an article in National Review Online, and he talked about that our side did not emphasize taxpayer funding of abortion. And he put in parentheses, he'd use the words abortion tax increase to try to dissuade people from voting for this particular measure, Proposition 1, or what was it? I think Amendment 1 or Proposition 1?
Issue 1.
Issue 1, yes, yeah. Do you think Michael was correct in his thoughts on the strategy that was used?
Because something is legal, that doesn't mean the government has to fund it. So I don't think that's necessarily going to follow. Republicans are still in control of the state legislature. They certainly have a pro-life governor in Mike DeWine. I don't see that there's going to be any court that can, it's possible they can find a judge who says if the process in the state is legal, the state has to fund it, but that doesn't automatically go together.
And now, the pro-abort side, they've won 7 straight ballot propositions. They're on a roll, I guess, I think. Is there anything that's going to stop them from continuing to win? Like in Missouri?
Hopefully, as we go through, we've got some experience under our belt. The ones last year came so quickly after Dobbs was overturned that some of the states, were a little caught off guard by the amount of money that was being poured into the effort. And, it takes a long time to put together a strategy and get all the groups working together. Ohio was maybe the real test of what can be done. And unfortunately, it didn't turn out the way we wanted. But we have already in the last several days been going through different things that maybe could or should be done differently, because we are looking at anywhere from 4 to 11 or 12 states that could have similar ballot measures next year. So we've hopefully got the time, and we learned a lot from Ohio, that we can make those corrections.
Well, what kind of corrections do you think would be benefiting the pro-life movement?
Some of it is messaging. Towards the end, what they started talking about in Ohio was how this is going to remove any restrictions, any regulations on the procedure. Informed consent will likely be thrown out now so that the abortionist does not have to tell the woman about possible complications from the abortion procedure or alternatives that are available. Quite frankly, I think a judge would easily say that there can be no limits on the abortionists, on the abortion facilities. So what kind of situation is a woman walking into if she does go to get an abortion? Some of that we started, pro-lifers started using that kind of message about abortion isn't always safe, and you are taking away safeguards that are currently in place. And that started having a little bit of an impact. People were kind of like, really? What are you talking about? How far does it go? So it's that kind of messaging. We know that we have to do a better job reaching out to college students and trying to convince them that this isn't the easy solution for women that they may think it is. And just like I said, some of the messaging. We also know that we have to spend more time on advertising. Overall, we have to raise a lot more money. And that's where, people with money, the larger donors, hopefully are going to step up. There's no question pro-life groups are going to be asking them for money. But we do need, when you've got a 2-to-1, or in some cases, I think it was even a 3-to-1 difference in the funding, that makes a huge difference. Oh, and one other thing I want to point out, in Ohio, a lot of the effort was focused on getting the pro-life vote out and trying to work with the churches to, get their people out to vote. That's critical. That has to be done. But there are so few people in this country that go to church anymore. We have to also reach out and find those people that don't have time for church and work on other messages, not just God created human life and, we have to protect that life. We have to be able to reach people who don't care about church and maybe are not all that interested in what God has to say.
And can you tell, what about early raising money? I've heard or read that if you get early money into a campaign, that's so much more beneficial. And we've had people like on the other side, George Soros and abortion groups, the ACLU, that are pouring money into to these campaigns. I think there was one contributor in Michigan that contributed $10 million, or maybe 4 or 5 people contributed $10 million on the other side. Do we have people like that?
There are, unfortunately, not as many. Governor Pritzker of Illinois has created a foundation specifically for the purpose of getting involved in these ballot measures and promoting pro-abortion efforts, pro-abortion candidates. That man himself is worth billions. So if he is going to, he's got his own group now that's going to start helping to fund. So we know that we are going to be up against unlimited funds. So one, yes, we need to have more money, and two, we just have to be very wise about how those funds are spent.
Tom Brecker mentioned in an article that it's not over yet, that taking away parental rights to look over their children, he thinks that that can be litigated and won on our side. Have you had any discussions with him or with people on this particular topic? From a litigation standpoint, I guess?
No, I think much of it is going to depend on which judge hears the case and how they want to decide. And since this is an Ohio constitutional measure, I would think the state Supreme Court is going to be the final authority. It would be wonderful if the parental consent law stands, but the language says any individual can get an abortion. It doesn't say any adult or any woman. It's any individual. So a 14-year-old girl can ask for an abortion, and under the Constitution, it says that no one else would have the right to interfere if that's what she wants.
Wow. Well, let's move on to another state. What happened in Mississippi?
Mississippi had a good night. The pro-life governor, Tate Reeves, was reelected. The pro-life lieutenant governor, Delbert Hosemann, was reelected. The pro-life attorney general, Lynn Fitch, who is actually the woman who was able to get the Dobbs decision before the Supreme Court, she was reelected.
Oh, great.
So it was just a good night. Well, I mean, good night for pro-lifers. Now, I will say that in Mississippi, the Democratic candidate for governor was pro-life. Cousin of Elvis Presley. A lot of people have probably heard that already. But he was well-known, well-liked, and for a while, some of the news agencies were reluctant to call the race for Tate Reeves because Presley was still kind of hanging in there for a while. But that state actually did have two candidates running, pro-life candidates running for governor, a Democrat and the incumbent Republican.
Wow, that's a rarity these days. And then moving on to Virginia, what's going on? What went on in Virginia?
Again, a lot of money and some very good candidates. The pro-abortion Democrats were able to get their people out to vote. And we have seen Virginia over the past several years trending more Democrat, more liberal. When Governor Glenn Youngkin was elected 2 years ago in 2021, that was actually considered an upset. He did defeat previous governor who was running again, which surprised everybody. But that was more the outlier. So Virginia is tough because it is turning blue.
I mean, the government continues to expand, and government employees tend to vote Democrat or liberal.
And there are a lot of them. I mean, Virginia, of course, has a lot of people in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., who work for the federal government. So that has actually made a big difference as the government grows. Maryland and Virginia have gotten more liberal because, unfortunately, and I'm not sure why, but federal employees tend to be more liberal and vote blue.
Were there any other surprises or interesting election results that you saw on November 7th of 2023?
That was pretty much the highlights. I mean, most of the states had school board and, council members, city council members, but those were the highlights. Now, in New Jersey, also elected their state legislature, and Democrats picked up a few seats there as well. They had a pro-abortion, very liberal Democratic governor, and the Democrats controlled both houses or both chambers in the state legislature. So unfortunately, the pro-abortion Democrats were able to pick up a few more seats to strengthen their hand.
That's in the state legislature, I presume.
Yes.
I see. Now, Chris Smith, he's a U.S. congressman. Do we have any other U.S. congressmen from New Jersey that are pro-life? Do you know?
Congressman Van Drew, who about, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago, was a Democrat and switched parties.
Oh,
And
wow.
he gave the credit for that to Donald Trump, saying that he didn't like what his party was doing, thought Trump was doing some good things, so he switched parties. Democrats were not able to take him out, so we actually have 2 pro-life Republicans from New Jersey.
I see. Well, great. And what is your hopes for National Right to Life Committee going forward here between now and, I guess, election next year?
We are going to be focused on the state ballot measures and races. We need to hold the U.S. Senate, hold the U.S. House of Representatives with a pro-life Republican majority. It would be great if we could pick up a couple of seats in the Senate. There aren't a lot of what I would determine are going to be close races, but we will certainly do what we can. And we have to elect a pro-life president. We have to get Joe Biden or whomever replaces him out of the White House, because the policies that they are putting into place are dangerous for the country. They're dangerous for unborn children. We've got the Department of Defense willing to hold up the appointments of their generals because they want abortion funding for their soldiers, the women in the military. We've got a Department of Health and Human Services doing everything it can to threaten hospitals and states with lawsuits because they are trying to place limits on abortion. We've got a Department of Justice going after pro-lifers who are praying and making a very First Amendment public position outside of abortion facilities. This administration, long time ago, decided that they were going to use what they call the whole of government approach to protect abortion and access to abortion. And they are doing it. There are a lot of different agencies that you would think, why are they even involved in abortion? But if there's anything they can do, the Biden administration is pushing it. So number one, we have to get a pro-life Republican into the White House. And I will just say this, I know that there are a lot of people who love Donald Trump, and they don't want to vote for anybody but him. There are also people who don't like Donald Trump. They don't think he was a good president, or they just don't admire him for whatever reason. And they say that they're not going to vote for him no matter what. We have to all come together. If we don't, and it probably won't be Joe Biden, but it could be Gavin Newsom, Kamala Harris, Michelle Obama, Governor Whitmer of Michigan. If the Democrats get in and have another 4 years to destroy this country and to destroy any respect for innocent human life, it doesn't matter who that candidate is. You may or may not like, something about that candidate. We have to come together in November to elect a pro-life president.
Well, I hope so too. I happen to have been traveling in the Canadian Maritimes recently, and on our way back to the Boston area, stopped in and saw a lady, Dr. Dora Ann Mills in Maine, near Farmington, Maine, and she said her sister was coming over. I told her I had a pro-life television show. And she said, well, don't mention that tonight. And her sister came over. And her sister, it turns out, is the governor of Maine. I had dinner with the governor of Maine. Not purposely, it just so happened that happened that evening. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time out to speak with us about all these issues and to kind of size up where we're at right now in the pro-life movement. Really appreciate it, Carol. Thank you.
Happy to do it. Thank you for asking me.
And folks, we hope you found today's show to be unique, informative, content-rich, truthful, and thought-provoking. Thanks for watching. I'm Brendan O'Connell, your friend for life.